Grew up in rural Nebraska on a farm, um, and my we were in summary very poor, dirt poor. I went to parochial school, Lutheran school. Grew up in a German-speaking community, and when I was a little kid, I thought all older people in the world spoke German. At any rate, the first day of school, when I was a first grader, we didn't have kindergarten. The teacher was seating us kids to find out whether we could where we could see the board best. That was my first and last time that I sat in the back row. I couldn't see what was written on the blackboard, so he moved me to the middle of the room. I still couldn't see what was on the blackboard, so then I sat in the front row and still couldn't see what was on the blackboard. So then he told my parents, of course, this kid needs glasses. And that started a round of optometrists, ophthalmologists, and quacks. I have a disease called retinitis pigmentosa, and I have an unusual variety of retinitis pigmentosa. But in summary, all retinitis pigmentosa is a disease of the retina, and over time your retina deteriorates. The photoreceptor cells, the cells in your retina which are sensitive to the light, die off. And even though all of the rest of your eye is perfectly fine, functioning just fine, but if the cells, the rods and cones in the retina don't are no longer sensitive to light, they can't translate the light into chemical reactions, which then translates into electrical impulses, which are sent to your brain, and you interpret what you see. That's exactly what my problem is. And the different versions of retinitis pigmentosa, it's a family of retinal diseases. In summary, you deteriorate over time, sometimes very quickly, sometimes very slowly over time, but you will eventually lose your sight. So my parents, both normally sighted. It's a genetic disease, and they both carried the gene recessively. And as an aside, all human beings carry several bad genes with them, and if they should two people with the same bad genes get together and procreate, the chances are good, if they have enough children, that they will have one or more children with that particular disease which the bad genes generate. And that's what the situation was in my family. Both my mother and father, fully sighted, had no idea whatsoever that they were carrying the recessive gene for retinitis pigmentosa. And I remember this distinctly. I am lucky enough to have a pretty good memory, and I remember most everything that happens to me. And so I was probably 8, maybe. And they took me to an ophthalmological clinic in Iowa, and the doctor examined me without my parents in the room, and then said nothing about and had his nurse take me back out into the waiting room, and then called my parents in. And I sat there for a while. I could still, as a little kid, I could see well enough that nobody knew that I was visually impaired. That was a big surprise to my parents. And I knew I couldn't see as well as adults, but I assumed that it was because I was little and adults could do everything else better than I, and that when I grew up I'd be able to see as well as adults could see. I obviously didn't say anything to anybody about my assumption, and so they didn't know that I couldn't see, that they had, in fact, a legally blind kid in their house. I was the oldest. At any rate, so my parents went in to see the doctor. A few minutes later, they came out, and I remember that. As we're talking, I can visualize it. All humped over, kind of walking slowly, and they came slowly over to me. Their faces were real sad, and I thought, oh my gosh, what did he say? So they got me in, took me out to the car. Everybody's real quiet, not saying very much. And on the way home, I got everything I wanted, and got some ice cream and some soft drinks, whatever. And then that night, they were up talking about me and what had happened, and my bedroom happened to be next to the room in which they were talking, so I was lying there listening to them, and that's how I found out that I was going to go blind. So when I was in graduate school in Colorado, I applied for a Fulbright, and because I was a German and mathematics major as an undergrad, and I was able to get the Fulbright, and I may have been the very first visually impaired, legally blind Fulbright scholar. And so that started me on a career. My wife and I went to Heidelberg, Germany, spent a year there. It was really excellent, and traveled all around Europe, and had for a couple of small-town kids from Nebraska, it was quite the eye-opening experience, broadened our horizons tremendously. We came back to the U.S. I got a job teaching at the Kansas School for the Blind, and after 3 years, I decided that wasn't for me. I went back to Colorado, worked on my doctorate, and was awarded my doctorate in record time. And because I was in a big hurry, I've always been in a big hurry to get everything done, and I applied for positions at universities, because that's where I wanted to be a college professor. And there were only 2 positions available, one at Northern, one at Ohio State. Disabilities program here at NIU is, in my mind, the best in the United States, also very well maybe the best on the planet. And so there we are. That's my story, and I'm extraordinarily pleased to have ended up here at Northern Illinois University, running this program for the last over 30 years. And so we have in our field an entire subspecialty that it's called orientation mobility, and we have one of the top programs in the country again, that is as one of the components of our program. Where we have made some major changes in that to keep up with the changes in our culture is that it is much more dangerous in the environment now for blind people who cannot see, than it was years ago. One of the major reasons is the quiet cars. Cars are much more quiet nowadays than they were, say, 20 years ago. And blind people who are negotiating their way through the environment on the street have to negotiate their way through traffic, depend majorly on their hearing. And well, there are many other things. But so we have developed special techniques to help to teach blind people to be able to cross streets and to negotiate their way through the environment when we have, for example, extremely quiet cars. The traffic is a lot more difficult, and drivers are much less patient and much more reckless nowadays than they were years ago. So we have adapted our training to meet those needs. Those are some of the kinds of things that we do here at NIU in order to maintain our status as the best program in the country. Teaching blind people is a career that brings with it many advantages. First of all, there is a desperate need for well-trained individuals to work with both blind children and adults. The job market is extraordinarily favorable for those who are looking for jobs in the area, and it's an extraordinarily rewarding career if you really want to make your life count for something. That is, leave the world better than you found it, then teaching blind individuals is the career for you.